picking up, should be where we left off, or we're going to pick up on chapter 2 of book 3, Two Towers. Right as they're run. So, chapter 1 ends, chapter 1, the departure of Boromir, ends with them sending Boromir down the river, literally, in a boat, weapons and swords and stuff piled around him from his enemies, and he has with him his golden belt buckle, the broken horn, and such. Okay? Then they decide, right at the end of the chapter, that since they can't follow Frodo and Sam, well, they could, but Aragorn says it wouldn't be wise. Strength isn't going to get them into Mordor. Frodo and Sam are going to have to do this on their own. So they decide to pursue the orcs. Why? Who do the orcs have? Merry and Pippin. They think if we can save Merry and Pippin, not all will be lost. So chapter 2, we get Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. I did not do this. I should have. At the end of the fellowship, we have Frodo and Sam going off. Merry and Pippin going off on their own, not willingly, but on their own. Gandalf dead. Boromir dead. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. So they're going one direction, they've gone another direction, they're going a direction, and they're going a direction. So we see the splitting, or as that last chapter in book 2 calls it, the breaking of the fellowship. It's the breaking of the fellowship in more than one way. And what Tolkien is going to do is he's going to follow at points these two on their journey, these two on their journey, these three on their journey. Okay? And as the second volume, Two Towers, and third volume, as the second volume turns into the third volume, we'll eventually see these groups all meet back up. Fairly soon in the Two Towers, we're going to see Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli meet back up with Merry and Pippin, etc. Okay? So they chase them. They run and run and run and run and run. What do they immediately realize? And it's largely because of Legolas. What do they immediately realize about these orcs? What is normal orc behavior? Let me put it that way.
They're out during the day.
They're out during the daytime. Orcs normally don't run out during the daytime, okay? So they're not, as far as you can have them, they're not normal orcs, right? They keep chasing them. They find a couple of clues that Merry and Pippin are still alive. They find one of the elven brooches. Aragorn says that wouldn't have fallen on its own. Okay? They find, little footprints. And they keep running on. I think they run on for about 3 days. Okay? One of the mornings, I think it's morning, might be afternoon, Legolas notices way off in the distance smoke. And orcs seemingly have stopped running. Because elves have fantastic eyesight, like 1020 or something like that, he can see the riders of Rowan way off in the distance when Sam and Aragorn cannot. So the riders start making their way towards them, and they decide they're going to be overrun. Okay? So what do? Do they just stand up, shields out, spears or swords in their hands, and wait for the riders to come? They don't. What do they do instead? How do they disguise themselves? They pull their cloaks over them and they look like rocks on the ground. All right? The riders go by and to where the line of riders is almost halfway beyond them. And suddenly, page 431 in my edition, Aragorn stands up and cries in a loud voice, "What news from the north, riders of Rohan?" And the riders that have gone on ahead, that are now past them, immediately check their steeds and turn around, and now they form a big circle around Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. 432, I think it is. Yep. One of the riders, the leader seemingly, asked them, "Who are you and what are you doing in this land?" What does he mean about in this land? What is this land?
Rohan?
It's the land of Rohan. What are you doing in our land, in our territory? It's like, we haven't given you permission to be here. Okay? Aragorn says, "I'm called Strider." Why doesn't he give his real name? "Hunting orcs." He says, "At first I thought you were orcs," the writer says. And he looks at him and says, "I don't think Strider's your real name. There's something about you. Strange is your clothing," also, middle of 432. "Are you elves?" Aragorn, "No." "Well, one of us is. Legolas from the woodland realm, distant Mirkwood. But we passed through Lothlorien, and the gifts and favor of the lady go with us." The gifts and favor of the lady go with us. What does he mean by gifts? There could be a literal meaning and there could be a figurative meaning. Literal meaning, obviously, the cloaks they're wearing, that's why they were invisible seemingly, and the other items that they received from her. Metaphorical meaning, her blessing goes with us. Okay? That's kind of a favor. Then there is a lady in the Golden Wood. In other words, we've heard stories, we've heard fairy tales. This is one of those things, it's like a shadow on a long lost memory that we hear repeatedly. Then there is a lady in the Golden Wood, as old tales tell. Why does Tolkien include that? What is Tolkien saying about old tales? Are they all automatically false? No. There might be little kernels, little germs of truth in them. Few escape her nets, they say. Who does he sound like? Boromir. These are strange days. But if you have her favor, then you also are net weavers and sorcerers, maybe, sounding more like Boromir. Okay? And then he looks at Legolas and Gimli. Why don't you speak? Gimli rose, planted his feet, okay, we're told, and his hand grips the handle of his axe. Okay, so when Aragorn is standing and talking, Gimli and Legolas are both sitting down. Legolas sitting down is about how tall? Probably like this. Gimli sitting down is probably like this. He's not much taller than a hobbit. 3 to 4 feet. 4 feet really kind of tops. So Gimli stands up, plants his feet, grabs his axe, doesn't pull it out, but holds onto it. What's he doing? He's taking a fighting stance. Okay? And he says, "Give me your name, Horsemaster, and I will give you mine, and more besides." I mean, it's a verbal slap. The writer, As for that, the stranger should declare himself first. What does Tolkien mean? It's a basic rule of etiquette. Okay? We kind of still have it today. If you were properly taught, I would say, how to use the telephone. You don't call somebody you don't know and say, who is this? Every time I get a call like that, I say, who is this? And if they don't answer, I just hang up. Usually I don't answer anyways. He says, but I'll tell you. I am called Eomer, son of Eoman, and I'm called the third Marshal of Riddermark. Gimli's like, cool. Then Eomer, son of Eoman, third Marshal of Riddermark. Notice he spits back exactly what he's heard. Let Gimli the dwarf Gloinson warn you against foolish words. Warn you against foolish words. That is a nice, polite way of saying what? You've just said foolish words. And to say foolish words, what does that really mean? You're a fool. Okay, this is a warrior society. You call somebody a fool, what's going to happen? You're going to die. You speak evil of that which is fair beyond the reach of your thought, and only little wit can excuse you. So unpack that. You speak evil of that which is fair beyond the reach of your thought. Okay, what is that which is fair beyond the reach of his thought? Galadriel. He's saying your mind cannot even conceive of her beauty. It is so beyond your ability to contemplate. And your only excuse is little wit. Now, that's probably understatement. And what he means by that is, you're an idiot. Eomer's eyes blazed, and the men of Rowan murmured angrily and closed in, advancing their spears. In other words, these guys aren't just there for their muscle and brawn. They understand when they've been offended. They understand when their leader has been dissed. I would cut off your head, beard and all, Master Dwarf, if it stood but a little higher from the ground. Okay? Gimli uses what kind of attack against Eomer? What kind of verbal rhetorical attack? It always means you don't have an argument. It's an ad hominem attack. It's to the man. You're a dummy and you're a fool. Okay? Eomer responds in kind. Yeah, well, you're a midget. Legolas, he stands not alone, bending his bow and fitting an arrow with hands that moved quicker than sight. In other words, Legolas pulls an arrow out of his quiver, knocks it on his bow, has the bow drawn before they can see it happen. It says before you would even get your stroke off, you'd be dead. Eomer raises his sword. Okay? And Aragorn jumps in. Stop. I mean, what's getting ready to happen? Unless Aragorn brings peace, there's going to be a slaughter. When you know more, you will understand why you've angered my companions. We intend no evil to Rowan or to any of its folk. Will you not hear our tale before you strike? Let us speak first. He says, I will. But wanderers in the Riddermark would be wise to be less haughty in these days of doubt. What are these days of doubt? Why are Eomer and the riders seemingly so keyed up, so charged?
They just got into a big fight with the orcs.
They just defeated a whole slew of orcs, okay? We find out through the conversation, they're not yet at open war with Sauron, but they probably will be soon, and they have problems also with Saruman, okay? So, he says to Aragorn, tell me first your right name. First tell me whom you serve. Are you friend or foe of Sauron, the Dark Lord of Mordor? I serve only the Lord of the Mark, he says. Theoden, king, son of Thengel. Just a little point of trivia. Theoden, king, son of Thingol. Theoden is the Old English word for king. King is what he's being called here, interestingly, okay? He says, we do not serve the dark power, the power of the Black Land, but neither are we at open war with them. And if you're fleeing from him, then you better leave. Why? If you're running away from Sauron, you need to get out of our territory. Why? Yeah, we don't want his armies coming into here. What does that suggest, possibly? Is Rowan trying to be Switzerland? Trying to be neutral? We desire only, okay, so he's telling us now, this is our credo. This is our we believe, or I believe. We desire only to be free and to live as we have lived, that is, to live as we are accustomed to living. Keeping our own, minding our own business, and serving no foreign lord, good or evil. Yes, they are attempting to be Switzerland of sorts. All they want is peace in their own land. The rest of the world can go to hell. Leave us alone. Who ultimately does not want that kind of existence? Okay? So he says, we welcomed guests kindly in the better days. That is, in the old days, we would have given you a red carpet, welcoming men. But in these times, again, these times, these days, etc., the unbidden stranger finds us swift and hard. He's saying something about the days that they live in. And it's the same thing that Gandalf told Frodo back in the shadow of the past. These are the days we're dealt. We don't get to choose the days we get. We just get to choose how we respond. So he's saying, in the better days, we responded openly. These are worse days. We have to be careful who we allow in. Who are you? Okay, he's already asked that before. Give me your real name. Whom do you serve? What does that question imply? What does he assume about Strider?
He has a master.
He has a master. He has a lord. Why? Because everyone has a master, unless you're a king. All right? Whom do you serve? At whose command do you hunt orcs in our land? Who ordered you to do this? Look at Aragorn's reply. I serve no man. I have no king. I have no one above me. I have no one over me. Now, that can be taken positively, as it is, or it can be taken negatively. If he has no lord, he has no master, he has no king, he has no one above him, that can mean he's like an outlaw, an exile. Okay? But that's obviously not the case. He goes on and says, but the servants of Sauron I pursue into whatever land they may go. Okay, now, think about what he means there. I don't care about your little borders. If I'm pursuing Sauron's forces, whether I'm in Rowan or Isengard or Rivendell, doesn't matter. Borders mean nothing. He's saying, my pursuit is all important. There are few among mortal men who know more of orcs, and I do not hunt them in this fashion out of choice. He says, the orcs hold captive two of my friends. In such a need, if I don't have horse, a man goes on foot. Nor will he count the heads of the enemy save with the sword. I am not weaponless. Well, as he's talking, he looks weaponless. He's not holding a sword. He's not holding a spear. One of the two weapons a rider of Rowan would have. Okay? He doesn't have a shield. He throws his cloak back. The elven sheath glittered as he grasped it. So, I'm assuming he's right-handed. He grabs the sheath. Why? So that he can easily pull the sword out of it. So the elven sheath glitters. We don't know if it has jewels or something like that. It probably does. Gemstones on it. And the bright blade of Anduril shone like a sudden flame as he swept it out. Notice, it doesn't become a flame. It shines like a flame. Probably because as he pulls it out, it catches the sunlight. And it's kind of blinding for a moment. And he cries out, Elendil. Then he gives his name. What's his name the equivalent of in our world? I am Arthur, son of Uther, son of Aragorn. I am Aragorn, son of Arathorn, and am called Elisar, the Elf Stone. The Elf Stone, that refers to the Silmaril that I talked about last week, or the Silmarils, plural. There were 3 of them. The Elfstone, Dunadan, and heir of Isildur, Elendil, son of Gondor. Here is the sword that was broken and is forged again. Will you aid me or thwart me? Choose swiftly. Put that in a modern context. That would be like, England being invaded, let's say during the Norman Conquest, 1066, and runs across and finds some people and says, I am Arthur, son of Uther, and pulls out, here is Excalibur. Now the Anglo-Saxons will go, cool, we could use that against the bastard. Literally, William the Bastard of Normandy is what he was called by the Anglo-Saxons. We call him today William the Conqueror because he won. Gimli and Legolas looked at their companion in amazement, for they had not seen him in this mood before. He seemed to have grown in stature while Eomer had shrunk, and in his living face they caught a brief vision of the power and majesty of the Kings of Stone. The Kings of Stone, if you remember, back just before the falls of Rauros, when they're going down the Anduin River, they see these huge columns, these statues. One is of Elendil and the other is of Isildur. Okay? When Aragorn first met Boromir, what did he tell Boromir about his, Aragorn's, appearance? I don't look anything like Elendil and Isildur as they're carved in the halls of Denethor. Here, Legolas and Gimli like, well, there is a resemblance there. And it seemed to the eyes of Legolas that a white flame flickered on the brows of Aragorn like a shining crown. That white flame, that's the Elfstone. Not literally. It's not literally a Silmaril, but it is metaphorically, spiritually, otherworldly there. Okay? Eomer steps back, a look of awe on his face, and he casts down his proud eyes. That is, he's not worthy to look at Aragorn. These are indeed strange days. Dreams and legends spring to life out of the grass. What are the dreams and legends? King Arthur's alive, and he has Excalibur with him. And what other dreams and legends? There is a lady in the Golden Wood, and she's good. And I think elves and dwarves in harmony, like it was eons ago. Tell me, Lord. Okay, when he calls Aragorn Lord, what does that mean?
He recognizes his authority.
Higher than me. What brings you here? What was the meaning of the dark words? Long has Boromir been gone. What's the doom you bring out of the north? the doom of choice. Why? Because doom, that word, comes from the verb daemon, which means to choose or to judge. It's the doom, the choosing of choice. You have two options, Elmer. What are they? You can aid me, or you can attempt to thwart me. He says, open war lies before Theoden, either with Sauron or against him. There's no more neutrality. You can't say, all we want is to live in peace and be free. Okay? So, they keep talking about the orcs they were pursuing and their friends and such. Says, we didn't see anybody other than orcs. Aragorn, are you sure? They would be like children. He goes, nope, no children, no dwarves. They were dressed like us. Well, that's true. We rode right past you. Might have missed them. Okay. They talk about the little ones as being hobbits and such. They're halflings. He says, oh, so the tales about the halflings are true. The tales about the sword that was broken are obviously true, so why wouldn't the other tales be true? But they're only a little people in old songs and children's tales out of the north. Do we walk in legends or on the green earth in the daylight? What's he really asking? What's true anymore? What is real? Aragorn, a man may do both. Why? How can you both walk in legends or on the green earth in daylight? Look at his next response. Before you look at the next response, 9/11. For not we, but those who come after will make the legends of our time. The green earth, say you, is a mighty matter of legend, though you tread it under the light of day. Why did I mention 9/11? It's been 21 years, 24 years, excuse me, almost 24 years, since the events of September 11th, 2001. And yet, we already have a legend of sorts about 9/11. Scott Beamer and the other folks on Flight 93, I think it was, who did what? Rather than let that plane fly into, we think the target was going to be either the White House or the Capitol. They took it down. They became legendary. I mean, that two-word phrase, let's roll, has become kind of legendary. Okay? Aragorn's point is, dude, we are the stuff of legends. Depending upon what? The doom of choice. How we choose to respond to the time in which we live. Okay? A writer interrupts and says, time is pressing, Lord. Speaking to Aylmer, Aylmer tells him, peace means shut up. So, 4:35. Aragorn and Aylmer talk more. Aragorn mentions about Rivendell, he mentions about Gandalf, he mentions about Gandalf's fall. Okay? He is no longer, etc. Says it's been 4 days since Gandalf was killed. He says we've come all this way on foot. Aylmer's amazed because of how far they've run. 437, towards the bottom. Aylmer says, okay, we'll let you borrow horses, but you got to come to Medicil. You've got to come to Theoden's Hall, okay, to bring them back, to return them, and to justify my letting you borrow them and letting you wander freely through Rowan. He says, I will. First, I've got to go make sure our friends aren't in the heap of dead bodies, the burning heap of dead bodies, okay? says, I cannot desert my friends while hope remains. Bottom of 437. Aylmer. Hope does not remain. They're not there. Okay? Then what happened to them? If you don't know, that is, if you cannot tell me with 100% certainty that they're dead, then hope does remain. All right? He says, again, they were as tired as we are. Oh, that's right. Middle of 438. Aylmer says, it is hard to be sure of anything among so many marvels. The world is all grown strange. Now, I mentioned when we were discussing the fairy story essay that those 4 things that Tolkien says fairy stories provide for adult readers, that they are for readers, not the characters in stories. That doesn't mean the characters in the stories can't experience those things. That is, the characters within the stories may experience fantasy, recovery, escape, and consolation. Here's an example, I think, of Aylmer experiencing recovery. Look what he says again. The world is all grown strange. He's looking at it like it is suddenly new and full of wonder. Elf and dwarf walk in company in our daily fields. That's how they are meant to walk. Okay? Folk speak with the lady of the wood and yet live. The sword comes back to war that was broken in the long ages ere the fathers of our fathers rode into the mark. How shall a man judge what to do in such times? What does that question really mean? How do I know what is the right thing to do and what is the wrong thing to do? What is good and what is evil? Notice, that's what the question means, because look at Aragorn's response. As he ever has judged. Good and ill have not changed since yesteryear. Nor are they one thing among elves and dwarves and another among men. In other words, good and evil are universally true. There are things that are universally good. There are things that are universally evil. Okay? Not just for now, all time. It is a man's part to discern them, to tell the difference between what is right and what is wrong. He says, as much in the golden wood, that is, even in Lothlorien, you have to be able to tell the difference, as well as in his own house. He says, you're right, that's true. And I don't doubt you or the deed that that my heart would do. He says, but I'm not free like you are. Right? Aragorn said, I serve no man. Aylmer does. He says, if I could do exactly what I'd let you go right. That's why he gets Aragorn's promise to return. Okay? So, they go off to see what happened to Merry and Pippin. End of the chapter, a couple pages before the end. They get to the edge of Fangorn Forest. And they talk about it on 442. Aragorn says, after Legolas says, Celeborn warned us not to go into Fangorn. Do you know why, Aragorn? What are the fables of the forest that Boromir had heard? He says, I've heard a lot of tales. He says, and if it weren't for Celeborn saying not to go in there, he said, I would have thought, I would deem them only fables that men have made. If you don't know, how am I going to know? You're a wood elf. How am I going to know more than you would? Legolas. Because you've journeyed farther than I. You've got more experience of the world than I do. He says, all I've heard about Fangorn is this. save only songs that tell how the Onodrim that men call Ents dwelt there long ago. For Fangorn is old even as the elves would reckon it. Aragorn says, yep, it is old. It's as old as the forest by the Barrow Downs. What is that forest? What is its name? The Old Forest. That's where Tom Bombadil lives. That's where Old Man Willow is. Okay? He says, in fact, its last strongholds go back to the mighty woods of the Elder Days. That's the first age of men. He says, what the secret is, I don't know. Gimli, and I don't want to know. All right? Chapter 3, the Uruk-hai. So, we begin. Good grief. Two Towers begins with Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. I'm skipping, after Merry and Pippin are taken and Boromir dies. We focus on them for a couple of chapters. Then we're going to get Merry and Pippin. Okay? And I'm not going to say anything about this chapter other than that we see the dire straits, so to speak, that Merry and Pippin are in, and that they have their wits about them to try to leave clues to where they are and such. And when the orcs get attacked by Eomer and his troops, they again have enough wits about them that they can trick a couple of the orcs and they escape. They go to the outside edge of the forest. They don't know the name of the forest. They have no idea what this thing is. It's just a forest that they want to hide in. Chapter 4, Treebeard. So the next morning, they go into the forest a little more, and there's an elevated part, a rise, a hill of sorts. They climb up on that, and there's a break in the clouds, and they can see kind of all around. Page 463. Merry says, the wind's changing. It's turned east again. It feels cool up here. Pippin, yes, I'm afraid this is only a passing gleam. Passing gleam of what? A shaft of sunlight. And it will all go gray again. What a pity. The shaggy old forest looks so different in the sunlight. I almost felt like I liked the place. And then they hear a voice. And the voice is something like, almost felt you liked the forest. That's good. That's uncommonly good. Because Tolkien tells us in his letters, the voice of Treebeard sounds like his good friend, fellow writer, C.S. Lewis. Lewis had this deep, booming voice. When Lewis would deliver lectures at Oxford, bear in mind, British universities are not like American universities. Professors don't teach like I'm doing. They'll deliver lectures a few times a year, and the lectures are open to the public. All the other stuff, all the other involvement they have with students are tutorials, where a group of students will come to the professor's rooms and read a paper they've written. And then everybody rips that paper apart. And then the next person reads a paper and everybody rips that paper apart and such, okay? When Lewis delivered lectures, it was standing room only and people out in the halls. When Tolkien delivered lectures, hardly anybody showed up because he mumbled and he didn't speak very loud. And Tolkien lectured from notes, Lewis lectured from memory, okay? Because he had pretty much all memory that he was doing. So, what's Treebeard?
An Ent.
What's an Ent?
Tree person, shepherd of trees.
A shepherd of trees, a walking, talking tree that shepherds other trees that move. Okay? I mean, these trees out here don't need to be shepherded because they're not going anywhere. Right? Not these ones specifically, others on campus have, they might need to be protected, which is another thing Ents do. Okay? So they meet Treebeard and they talk with Treebeard a lot. And Treebeard asks them if they knew Gandalf. They ask him, did you know Gandalf? Not, do you know? Page 466. Merry says, and did you know Gandalf? Yes, I do know him. The only wizard that really cares about trees. Do you know him? Yes, we did, said Pippin. He was a great friend. He was our guide. Notice the shifting in verb tenses. And Treebeard picks up on it. Why do you speak about Gandalf as if his part in a story came to an end? And they tell him what happened. Okay? They keep talking. What's the purpose of Merry and Pippin meeting Treebeard?
They're the ones that move the Ents to actually become part in the.
Why? What do they tell him? What do they tell Treebeard about? That Gandalf related in Council of Elrond. About Isengard and Saruman. Saruman has gone rogue, dark, evil. Okay? He wants to be a ringmaker. So, 472 and 73, Treebeard talks about Saruman and says, I know he's a wizard. I don't know the history of wizards. They appeared after the great ships came over the sea. But if they came with the ships, I never can tell. The great ships that came over the sea is when the elves had gone over to Valinor. They lived there for a long time. And then the elves do great evil in Valinor. And some of them escape. That's when the great ships came from over the sea. I'm pretty sure. Okay? But then he goes on and says, I think that I now understand what he is up to. Bottom of 473. He is plotting to become a power. He wants to become like Sauron. Okay? So he goes on and talks about things he's done with orcs. Talks about he has a mind of wheels and metal and cogs. He doesn't care for living things. And so he says, I will stop Saruman. Because what has Saruman been doing to trees? Cutting them down and burning them. So, he takes them to the Entmoot, and we hear the Ents decide to march, something they've not done in ages. Chapter 5. I'd really like to get to the end of book 3 today. Chapter 5, White Rider. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, back to them. They're in the eaves of Fangorn. It's cold. Okay. They see an old man. They call out to him. He doesn't do anything. He ignores them. They figure out Merry and Pippin had gotten into the forest. They'd somehow escaped the orcs. And their path leads into the forest and disappears. Okay? Bottom of 490, top of 491. They're going in, and Legolas says, in response to Gimli's, I feel the air is stuffy. This wood is lighter than Mirkwood, but it is musty and shabby. Lighter meaning there's more light in it. Mirkwood just means dark wood. It's gloomy. This wood feels kind of oppressive and heavy. Legolas, it is old, very old, so old that almost I feel young again, as I have not felt since I journeyed with you children. He said, boy, I would love to come here in peacetime. Gimli, you are a wood elf anyway, though elves of any kind are strange folk, yet you comfort me. Where you go, I will go. That's a paraphrase from the book of Ruth in the Old Testament, where Ruth says to Naomi, her mother-in-law, whither thou goest, I will go. After her, Ruth's husband, has been killed. Okay? He says, keep your bow ready to hand, etc. They keep going into the forest. 492, 493. they see this old man again. Shabby gray, hunched over a little bit. They start to call out to him or look at him. And Aragorn says, in response to Legolas and Gimli, Gimli says, Legolas, get your arrow ready to shoot him. He's like, I can't shoot him. I don't know that he's guilty of anything. Aragorn says, you're right, we can't. Top of 493. At that moment, the old man quickened his pace and came with surprising speed to the foot of the rock wall. So they're walking along. He comes to the foot of this cliff-like thing. They can't see his face. It's covered by the hood of his hat, the brim of his hat. And he says, finally, well met indeed, my friends. I wish to speak to you. Will you come down or shall I come up? Without waiting for an answer, he begins to climb. Gimli says, shoot him! Did not I say that I wish to speak to you? Put away that bow, Master Elf, and the bow and arrow fall from Legolas's hands. Now, who gave him the bow and arrow? Galadriel. And his arms hung loose at his side, like he no longer has power to hold anything. And he says to Gimli, take your hand from your axe haft till I am up. And he stands still as stone. Okay? Aragorn speaks to him, says, you speak as one who knows the forest well. They go back and forth. And Aragorn says, what is your name? Top of 494. Have you not guessed it? You've heard it before. Yeah, you've heard it. They don't have a clue. The old man starts talking, kind of like riddling. And then he turns and moves towards a heap of fallen stones at the foot of the cliff behind them. And as if a spell had been removed, like before he's looking at them, he's focused on them, he turns away, the focus goes away, and they're freed. Gimli goes to his axe, Aragorn pulls his sword, Legolas picks up his bow. The old man doesn't take any notice. He stoops, sits on a flat stone, and his great cloak opens up a little bit. And they saw beyond doubt that he was clothed beneath all in white. Saruman. The man jumps, and there he stood, grown suddenly tall, towering above them. His hood and his gray rags were flung away, his white garments shone. He lifted his staff, Gimli's axe leaped from his grasp, fell freeing to the ground. Aragorn's sword, stiff in his motionless hand, blazed with a sudden fire. Legolas gave a great shout, shot an arrow into the air that burst into flame. Mithrandir, the elvish name for Gandalf. What is this? What is it for both the reader and Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli? It's a eucatastrophe. You cannot count on this to happen again. Okay? Well met, I say to you, Legolas. 495, Aragorn, Gandalf, beyond all hope. You return to us in our need. What veil was over my sight? Okay? Gimli, but you're all in white now, he says. In. Now, what should they have realized about when they saw the bit of white cloak beneath the gray? What did Gandalf tell everybody at the Council of Elrond about Saruman? Coat of many colors. But it took Gandalf to really look carefully to see it was shimmering these other colors. Gandalf. So, Gimli says you are all in white. Like white is something he can put on and take off. Gandalf, yes, I am white now. What's the difference between being in white and being white? Indeed, I am Saruman, one might almost say. Saruman as he should have been. I passed through fire and deep water since we parted. Through fire and deep water. I've forgotten much that I thought I knew and learned again much that I had forgotten. Okay? So, they ask him about Merry Pippin. They talk about Frodo and Sam. They keep talking. Aragorn says, bottom of 496, again, Gandalf still talks in riddles. He says, no, I was just talking to myself, you know. Best to choose the wisest person to speak to when you're surrounded by the young. Aragorn's like, I'm not young in any reckoning of the world. Talk about Saruman, which I'm not going to go into. Pages 498 and 99. Gandalf says, Saruman has forgotten about Treebeard. Aragorn's like, what's a Treebeard? He has to explain. 499. Gandalf says, Merry and Pippin are with Treebeard and the Ents. Aragorn. The Ents? Then there is truth in the old legends about the dwellers in the deep forests and the giant shepherds of the trees. Are there still Ents in the world? I thought they were only a memory of ancient days. Indeed, if they were ever more than a legend of Rohan. Now, think of the irony of this. Aragorn, for most people that he meets, is a legend of men. And here he is talking about the Ents as if they're just a legend. Not much time earlier, he told Eomer, it is possible to walk among legends on the green earth. Legolas, a legend? No. All the elves know about the Onodrim. Okay? Gandalf goes on. Treebeard is Fangorn. That is, Fangorn Forest is named after the Fangorn, as it were. He's the guardian of the forest. He's the oldest of the Ents. The oldest, notice this now, the oldest living thing that still walks beneath the sun upon this Middle Earth. Is there a problem? You're nodding your head. Why, Jacob? Tom Bombadil said, eldest I am. Here's the question. Does Tom Bombadil walk beneath the sun on this Middle Earth? Or is Tom Bombadil kind of like everywhere at once? If my understanding of Tom Bombadil is being God, a manifestation of God, then he's not under the sun, okay? It's the only way I think you can explain it. It's either that or this is one of the errors that Tolkien didn't get it correct, okay? So, Gimli says, I thought Fangorn was dangerous. Bottom of 499. Gandalf says, dangerous? And so am I. Dangerous. More dangerous than anything you will ever meet unless you're brought before the seat of the Dark Lord. And Aragorn is dangerous. And Legolas is dangerous. And you, Gimli, are dangerous. Okay? What will the Ents do, Legolas asks. That is, the Ents have now been roused. And the language that is used to describe the rousing of the Ents is like a little pebble that falls at the top of a mountain. And it creates what? It starts an avalanche. Okay? He tells Aragorn on 500, don't regret the choice he made in the Valley of the Immen Mule. That is the choice to follow Merry and Pippin, not to go after Sam and Frodo. Bottom of 501, top of 502. They get Gandalf to explain what happened when the bridge of Khazad-dûm fell. Okay? He says, long time I fell, long I fell, he fell with me, his fire was about me, I was burned, we plunged into the deep water, they went down through this abyss, said we finally reached the bottom, climbed up the endless stair, they climbed up and came out where? So you have this mountain, like this. You have the mines of Moria that go through, and there's all different kinds of depths, it goes all the way down. And there's also a huge abyss. But then out of the abyss, and then up here, there's like a little shack with a doorway. It's Mount Carathras. It's the same mountain that wouldn't let him go over before. Okay? So he says, we climbed up that stairway, page 502 in the middle. There upon Calebdil was a lonely window in the snow, and before it lay a narrow space, a dizzy eyrie above the midst of the world. The sun shone fiercely there, but all below was wrapped in cloud. Out he sprang, and even as I came behind, he burst into new flame again. Okay? There was none to see, or perhaps in after ages songs would still be sung of the battle of the peak. And then he laughs. What would they say? What would they see? Lightning and storm, you know. A great smoke rose above us, vapor and steam. Ice fell like rain. I threw down my enemy, and he fell from the high place and broke the mountainside where he smote it in his ruin. It's almost a literal quotation from, I can't remember, Ezekiel, Daniel in the Old Testament, talking about the casting out of Lucifer from heaven. Then darkness took me, and I strayed out of thought and time. What does it mean to stray out of thought and time? He left time behind. Dead. Okay? And I wandered on roads that I will not tell. Naked I was sent back for a brief time until my task is done. I was sent. There had to be a sender. Okay? It's thought, and I think Tolkien might discuss this somewhere in one of his letters, that when he strays out of thought and time, he goes off to what are called the halls of Mandos in Valinor, and he's healed. He's revived. He's resurrected and sent back. He's not resurrected as Gandalf the Grey. He's resurrected as Gandalf the White, as he said, as Saruman should have been, purged of all evil. Okay? He says, and he was sent back. How was he sent back? And naked I lay upon the mountaintop. I was alone, forgotten, without escape upon the hard horn of the world. There I lay, staring upward, while the stars wheeled overhead. Now, naked I was sent back can have two meanings. It can mean physically he didn't have any clothes on, or it could mean he wasn't bodied yet. Like he had no physical form, but he lay there and he saw like time passing by. And Gwaihir the Windlord sees him, not sees him with the body, but spiritually, so to speak. Okay? Gwaihir says, I'm here to pick you up, etc. Lady Galadriel sent me. Why/when did Galadriel send Gwaihir the Windlord? The implication is pretty soon after they tell her Gandalf fell in Moria. Like, no, he's not fully dead. He's only mostly dead, you know. She's Miracle Max through Tolkien. So, he then brings word to Legolas and Aragorn from Galadriel. Okay? She essentially says, remember the paths of the dead. Top of 503. Not a cheerful This isn't a pick-me-up speech. This isn't a go team. You're down at the half and you've got to dig deep. Then she says to Legolas, beware the sea. If you hear the sound of the ocean, he will never have rest in Middle-earth. So that's the thing about the elves. If they hear the sound of the ocean, they will always want to go over the sea to Valinor. Even a wood elf, whose love is the trees and not water in the ocean. Gimli says, she sent me no message. Legolas, dark are her words. Gimli, be glad you don't have any words from her. He says, doesn't, it's something. Even if she said, Gimli, you're going to die, that would. Oh, yeah, sorry. Gandalf says. Here's her message to Gimli, son of Glóin, 503. Give his lady's greeting, Lock-bearer. Wherever thou goest, my thought goes with thee. But have a care to lay thine axe to the right tree. What does that mean? Wherever you go, my thought goes with you. Is it because he has the 3 strands of her hair, and the hair were connected to her head, and her head is where the thoughts are? No. What's it mean? Gimli made such an impression on her, he is always in her mind, which is why we're told, in happy hour you have returned to us, Gandalf, cried the dwarf, capering as he sang loudly in the strange dwarf tongue. What does it mean to caper? He's dancing. Gimli understands what that means. She's thinking of me. Okay? Gimli's kind of fallen in love with her. So, chapter 6, King of the Golden Hall. They go off to Mediceld. ELD, may do, means mead. Seld means hall. It's Old English. Okay? So they go off to Mediceld. Why? This is Theoden's hall. Why do they go there? Why don't they go catch up with Merry and Pippin and Treebeard and march on Isengard?
Gandalf tells Aragorn not to worry about Merry and Pippin, and then Aragorn is promised to come back.
Aragorn promised to return the horses, and that he would, because there's a possibility Éomer could get in trouble for having let them wander in the land. Okay? They come across a burial on page 508. We see a song that Aragorn sings in the common speech. This is from an Old English poem called The Wanderer, or it's based upon. It's not literally from it, okay? But it echoes very strongly. It's called the ubi sunt motif. The where are or where have. Ubi sunt, Latin for where are. Okay? They ride around this barrow and sing this. It's a celebration, commemoration of the dead. They get to the hall, and the door warden makes them stop, says you have to be disarmed, Wormtongue's orders and such. And they all agree to leave aside their weapons. Aragorn with, kind of great difficulty. But Gandalf refuses to leave his staff. Why? I'm an old man. Says if you're going to take a crutch or a prop from an old man, then Theoden can come out and talk to me out here. So, they go in, and Gandalf salutes, hails, you can say, Theoden. Wormtongue talks. They go back and forth. Wormtongue says a bunch more. Gandalf sings a little bit of a line. And then Gandalf says, to 5:14, he raises his staff, There's thunder, sunlight's cut off from the eastern windows, hall's pitch black, and we hear Gandalf say, we hear Wormtongue say, "Did I not counsel you, Lord, to forbid his staff? That fool Hama has betrayed us." There's a flash of lightning. Wormtongue sprawls on the ground. Gandalf says, "Now, son Theoden, son of Thengel, will you hearken to me? Do you ask for help?" He lifts his staff. He points to a high window. And say this room or the hall, it'd be like pointing to the top corner block on this side of the wall, and light comes in through there. How much light would that provide? Not much, but a little bit. And he says, not all is dark. You look around and what? It's mostly dark. Take courage, Lord of the Mark, for better help you will not find. No counsel have I to give to those that despair. Counsel I could give, and words I could speak to you. Will you hear them? So how has Theoden been described when we first see him? He's sitting on a throne, and he's kind of hunched over, gripping the arms. He's gray. His skin is gray, like he's ill. And Theoden slowly gets up out of his chair. This is not at all like what's done in the film. Okay? Notice, he leaves his chair. A faint light grew in the hall again. Is that because Gandalf has, pointed to somebody off on the side and they're slowly raising the dimmer switch? Why is it getting light? It's symbolic.
It's the light of hope.
It's because Theoden is coming back. He's taking his rightful place again. Okay? The woman who we've heard described runs to his side, takes his arm, and helps him out of the throne and steps down the steps from the dais down to the floor. Gandalf says, "Open the doors." The doors roll back. Cold air comes in. Gandalf tells Theoden, "Tell your guards to go down." Why? Because Gandalf said, "I could tell you lots of things, but they're words only for your ears." And he doesn't want to do it here. He wants to do it outside. Okay? Theoden tells the woman, Eowyn, go back inside. Eowyn, sister, daughter. She's his niece. Eomer is his nephew. All right? So, we're told right in the middle of 5:15, thus Aragorn for the first time in the full light of day, behold, Eowyn, lady of Rohan, thought her fair, fair and cold, like a morning of pale spring that has not yet come to womanhood. And she was now aware of him, tall, heir of kings, wise with many winters, gray cloaked, hiding a power that yet she felt. So now, Gandalf takes Theoden outside. They're standing on this rocky flagstone porch, looking out on the kingdom of Rohan. And we get this description, bottom of 5:15. From the porch upon the top of the high terrace, they could see beyond the stream the green fields of Rohan fading into distant gray. Winds of curtains of wind-blown rain were slanting down. The sky above and to the west was still dark with thunder. Lightning far away flickered among the tops of hidden hills. But the wind had shifted to the north. And already the storm that had come out of the east was receding, rolling away southward to the sea. Suddenly, through a rent in the clouds behind them, so they're facing this direction, it's dark and gray, it's rainy, and suddenly, behind them, there has to be a hole in the clouds because now they see a shaft of stabbing light. The falling showers gleamed like silver, and far away the river glittered like a shimmering glass. And Theoden says, "It is not so dark here. This is a eucatastrophe." Because what does the light tell us? Is it just the sunlight piercing the gloom of the weather out in Rowan? No. The light of hope, piercing the gloom in Theoden's mind. This is an experience of joy that Tolkien writes about. Joy, a glimpse of joy beyond the confines of the world. It is not so dark. Gandalf, no, nor does age lie so heavily on your shoulders as some would have you think. Cast aside your prop. Throw away your stick. And he does. And what happens? So he's leaning on it, and he does this. He stands up straight. He throws his shoulders back. He lifts his head. And Theoden is back. Theoden is younger than Aragorn. I think Theoden's supposed to be like 54 or 55. But he's been portrayed as a 90-year-old man. Because why? That's what he's been told. That's the poison that Wormtongue has been putting in his mind. You're too old. You can't do anything. You're weak. Okay? Notice how different this is than the film. Because in the film, what does Gandalf have to do? He points his staff at Theoden, and he casts out Saruman. Like Saruman is possessing Theoden. Utterly stupid on Peter Jackson's part. Okay? Dark have been my dreams of late, but I feel as one new awakened. In other words, recovery. A return to health, Tolkien says in the fairy story essay. I wished, that you had come before, Gandalf. I think you've come too late. He says, no, I don't think so. You've got Éomer in prison, right? Release him. And he says, you also need a sword. Why? Because he's a warrior. The men of Rowan are based upon Anglo-Saxon England. These are Anglo-Saxon Old English warriors, where you have to die with your sword in your hand. Okay? So, 10 minutes, we're going to skip a bunch. What does Theoden agree to do?
Ride against Saruman.
They're going to ride against Saruman. So he's got to marshal his troops and do what for the women and children and old and infirm. They've got to be protected. Okay? So, Battle of Helm's Deep. I'm skipping a bunch. Battle of Helm's Deep. Chapter 7. The chapter is 16 pages. Okay? The actual battle is only 9 pages. If you've seen the Two Towers film, the Battle of Helm's Deep is fully 1/4 of the entire film. And the film is like 2 hours long, 2.5 hours long. It is the battle, only 9 pages of the entire The Two Towers. Why? Why go from something so minuscule in the book to being 1/4 of your experience of the film? Louder? Filler? Could be. You got all the great CGI effects, right? I mean, 10,000 orcs just... I think it's because Peter Jackson does not understand what The Lord of the Rings is. Peter Jackson reads The Lord of the Rings as sword and sorcery. It's Dungeons and Dragons, before there were Dungeons and Dragons, so to speak. So the more battle you can do, the greater the idea. I was on a conference in Oxford, 2004, I think, and one of the things we had a panel discussion about was, does Tolkien valorize, celebrate war? And the question was asked because of this. The film. And all of us on the panel were like,
No, just the opposite. Tolkien hates war because he experienced it personally. He lost all but one of his best friends. Okay? So we're not going to say really anything about Battle of Helm's Deep. Other than that, it looks bleak at the end. Okay? Chapter 8 until Gandalf shows up and the Huorns. Chapter 8, Road to Isengard. Right? What do they see as they're making their way to Isengard? They see the Huorns. There are forests where there didn't used to be forests. And what happened to all the dead orcs? They disappear. Why? Because the Huorns come in and move over them, and it's like seemingly they turn them into compost. The evil is erased. All right? They see the Ents off in the distance. They get to Isengard. And they see bottom of 556. So the ring of stone around Isengard has been knocked down. Where there had been big gates, there's now big slabs of stone. And on these slabs of stone, there are two little tiny figures with smoke coming out of them. We're told, bottom of 556, for a moment, Theoden and Eomer and all his men stared at them in wonder. Amid all the wreck of Isengard, this seemed to them the strangest sight. And then the small, smoke-breathing figure became suddenly aware of them. He runs up and says, "We are the door wardens. Meriadoc, son of Ceradoc, is my name, my companion," and he kicks Pippin, "is Peregrine, son of Baladin of the House of Took. Far in the north is our home, the Lord Saruman is within, but he's closeted with Wormtongue." Why is Wormtongue there? They gave him the choice. You can prove your devotion to me, Theoden essentially says, by serving me, by marching with me in battle, or you can go back to your master. He chooses the latter. Okay? So, Gandalf and Saruman go off to talk to Treebeard. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli spend time with Merry Pippin, drinking beer, smoking pipes, catching up. Okay? And we get a lot of background about what happened with Merry Pippin. Flotsam and Jetsam. That's what that chapter is largely about. And we're going to skip to, we got 6 minutes. The voice of Saruman. Man, almost. We won't finish this part, but. So, Gandalf tells the others, "I need to talk to Saruman." Aragorn, this concerns you, you're coming too. It's not like Aragorn has a choice this time, okay? Legolas and Gimli say they want to. Theoden will be there because it concerns him closely also. And they come to the foot of what's called Orthanc. Orthanc is a tower that looks like this, probably has fenestrations on the top, okay? And it's got a stairway that winds up it, and then up here is a platform, okay? The riders of Rowan all stay down here. Merry and Pippin stay down here. Legolas and Gimli stay down here. In fact, they all stay down here, except for Gandalf at first goes up and then something else. So, 577. Gandalf says, "I'm going up. I've been in Orthanc. I know my peril." Theoden says, "I'll go up too." Okay? Aragorn, you're coming. Gimli says, "We want to go too." And because they represent their kindreds. So the riders and Merry and Pippin stay down here. So Gandalf goes up to the door and bangs on it. So, come on. So they make their way up to this platform up here. I'm going to make this a little bit taller. And then there's another platform up above that, and then up here is kind of the battlement thing. Saruman comes up here. Gandalf, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and Theoden stay down here on this platform. All right? So, bangs on the door. Saruman, come forth. Then we hear a voice. Who is it? What do you wish? Wormtongue. Gandalf, go and fetch Saruman. The window closes. Saruman comes. They hear another voice. And we're told. Suddenly another voice spoke low and melodious, its very sound an enchantment. Those who listened unwarily to that voice and could seldom report the words that they heard. And if they did, they wondered, for little power remained in them. Mostly they remembered only that it was a delight to hear the voice speaking. All that it had said seemed wise and reasonable, and desire awoke in them by swift agreement to seem wise themselves. When others spoke, they seemed harsh and uncouth by contrast. And if they gainsaid the voice, anger was kindled in the hearts of those under the spell. For some, the spell lasted only while the voice spoke to them. And when it spoke to another, they smiled, as men do who see through a juggler's trick, while others gape at it. For many, the sound of the voice alone was enough to hold them enthralled. But for those whom it conquered, the spell endured when they were far away, and ever they heard that soft voice whispering and urging them. But none were unmoved. None rejected its pleas and its commands without an effort of mind and will, so long as its master had control of it. So none were unmoved means what? Who's included in none? Gandalf, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Theoden. Unless what? Without an effort of mind and will. So when Saruman spoke, Gandalf had to consciously, he's a liar, he's a liar, he's a liar, he's a liar. All right? Well, the voice says, why must you disturb my rest? Will you give me no peace at all by night or day? And they look up, and we get the description of Saruman, and Gimli says, like, and yet unlike. Because like means what? It's similar. What does it not mean? Same. It's not the same. It's close, but it's not the same. And the voice speaks again. This time, and it says, two of you I know, Gandalf and Theoden. Okay? We're going to stop there. Hope we would get through this, but we won't. We'll pick up in this spot on whatever day. Today's what, Tuesday? On Thursday. Trying to remember. Quiz is due. Did I do a quiz? It was on Friday? Okay, I've already graded it then.